Thank you, the moderator. We have seen and heard and even understand a lot about the Sahel, and more importantly, the role Russia and China have been playing in the information, disinformation and information disorders in that region. And at the same time, what EU should do. Russia has majorly relied on disinformation and hybrid warfare to create instability in the Sahel. And in doing this, what they are trying to do is to undermine the Western influence. But this disorder or these disinformation efforts, they are done or they flow or they are disseminated through online platforms, through traditional media outlets. They also use local influence. And when we say online platforms, we have mentioned all of these, including the social media platforms. And that's why you now see an average young person or youth, as we established yesterday, between the ages of 15, even we can bring it down to like 12 now. They carry phones, Android phones, and what they press there or what they use there is the internet, the online networking. They use the Twitter, the WhatsApp, they use the Facebook to do a lot of things and to get so many information. Russia also uses traditional media outlets. These traditional media outlets have been there. Television, of course, televisions are not in most homes, but they have radio. They have radio, and this radio they use reaches even the bushes in the hinterland, downtown, everywhere. It reaches the bushes, and seriously, like I said yesterday, an average person in the Sahel, rich or poor, particularly the poor, they carry transistor radio. It's a pocket radio. It's with them. Information flows through this seriously and massively. And they use it in a very huge form, to the extent that even beyond that now, you see Russians or coming, meeting local community leaders, meeting religious leaders, even some at times distribute this to give to people in the community so that they can listen to news. And these things, they are propagated and disseminated using the local languages. So in other words, it gets to the people effectively. So they use even the traditional media outlets, they use the local influence, they use community leaders, they disseminate this through youth leaders. They also do what we call, they use local influencers too. There are people in the community that are respected. They are respected. Maybe they have some education, which many doesn't have in that community. So they become influencers. When they are speaking, people gather to listen to them. People believe them. People trust whatever they say. So these local influencers, they come around. Politicians are also used. Politicians are used because to them, it's a means to an end. They are politicians. They are looking or seeking for political power. But in doing that too, if they use this medium that Russia had created for them, they have the opportunity to talk to the mass of the people, and they are seen as being legitimate. They are seen as assuming leadership role even before they get the political power. So they use even religious leaders too. Pastors, priests, like AISHA mentioned, and imams. But if you look at the Sahel, very well, except Nigeria, majorly in the north, if you look at the population of the Sahel, they are about over 70% or more are Muslims. They are majorly Muslims, particularly you look at Mali, you look at Burkina Faso, Niger, is over 80-85% Muslim population. So when their imams, their religious leaders speak to them, the clerics speak to them, these scholars, Islamic scholars speak to them, they believe them more than their parents, even beyond the government. They believe them more than their parents. Whatever they say, they listen, they do, and they carry out. So these are the outlets they use or means of flowing information used by Russia And the combination of this online disinformation and traditional media manipulation, Russia has used this effectively in Central African Republic, which is still happening there now. It's still not stable, but they assume they have helped Central African Republic. It's totally taken over by the Russians. And now they are bringing in the military aspect of it, training their military, doing all of this. That's what they are claiming. In Mali, they have used it very, very well, and it's working for them in Mali. In Burkina Faso too, they have used it. They are still using it in Niger as we speak now. And this is working very well for Russia. But in doing all of this, using these online platforms for flow of information, for dissemination of information, and control of whatever the content that they are passing in as the information, Russians will make sure that this information carries the content they want. They carries the content they want to get across to the people in changing public opinion, in changing public perception towards them as savior and against the West. That's what they use effectively. On the side of China, China has been able to control telecommunications network in Africa, not just the Sahel. So they have used telecommunications. And in these telecommunications they have used, it has given them the opportunity to regulate the internet and the flow and dissemination of information. And in doing this, they have used both digital and even traditional media at the same time. This allows China to control and distribute contents they want to preach to the people. And that has been working very well in Sudan. In Sudan, they have used it so well in Sudan. China is also entrenching itself even in Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso now. But effectively, China has done this very well because presently now China controls the telecommunication in Sudan. The internet is regulated, dissemination of information is controlled, is regulated. The content in the information that is being passed or flown to people or being transferred to people is regulated by China. And this has given them the opportunity and the leverage. Now, China has used its Belt and Road Initiative, the BRI. The BRI has gone so viral, so big, and yet we have not really seen so much on these things, but they are using it to get to the people, change public perception, change public opinion. So the BRI they have used, and in using BRI, China has been able to bring in a lot of Chinese firms in the construction, in maintenance, in the media. In fact, Chinese media outlets, they are really controlling the Sudanese media now. And they have gotten into serious partnership in Sudan and many other places. And this, they have called digital infrastructure. They have built serious digital infrastructure, partnering with local media, promoting Chinese interests. But the Chinese human rights abuses, Chinese autocratic violation of local laws or rules or even international law will never come on this media or as part of the content of the information flow. They will never do that. And that has always been absent in whatever they do. In a study we conducted recently in that Sahel, we discovered that what authors and scholars have called what the Chinese are doing in the Sahel is called digital authoritarianism. Digital authoritarianism is a strategy of controlling the digital infrastructure, the mass media, the information environment, the actors in the information environment, the means and ends within all of these things. What they have done in controlling this, whereby which they allow the state to exercise significant influence over public discourse. So all discourse, particularly the one relating to China, Russia, is done effectively and portrayed positively to sway the people's perception and opinion, while discourse or discourses on the presence, the effects, the role of the West is put in total distrust, is put in negative perspectives, is portrayed in a very wicked form. Take, for example, they will be telling the Malians, the Burkinabes, they'll be telling Nigerians, telling even Sudanese across the Sahel and beyond in Africa, they'll be telling them that if you allow the West to come back or do anything for you, it is neo-colonialism. To them, that's what they have told them. It's neo-colonialism. It's coming back to also punish you for another century. They keep doing that. Why they portray themselves as saviors? They portray themselves as people who will come and help their lives, help their environment. But of course, nothing is seen. See the Chinese. If they want to control roads now, if you look at my country, then some other countries in Africa we have been to, you go to Mali, they are controlling road or they are building roads or they are building rail. The Chinese will bring the workers. The Chinese will bring the artisans, where normally you should have engaged the locals or the local population, fetching water, the bricklayers, or bringing welders to do all of that. Chinese bring their people. So where is the technology transfer? Where is the development partner you are portraying in your flow of information or what we call disinformation in the Sahel? Nothing. So, but all of this will not be disseminated or flown or shared to people in that place. So they've used all of this to sway people's opinion and to do all of that. But the media ecosystem disruption, the tactics employed by both Russia and China, they have far-reaching implications on the Sahel. What are those implications? One of them is both of them have seriously, through disinformation and disinformation flow or dissemination of information, the Chinese and the Russians have been able to undermine democratic governance in the Sahel. And this has led to democratic reversals and even resurgence of coups. If you look at it, how many coups, so many coups the Sahel has witnessed, not even the entire African continent, from Sudan to Mali, to Burkina Faso, to Niger, Guinea-Conakry, all of that, even to failed coups in Syria alone, in Guinea-Bissau, you will see that all of this is the handwork of the information flow, information dissemination, the information environment, the actors of this information and the actors of this malinformation and information disorders in the Sahel, and it has led to undermining democratic governance. Again, it has also led to exacerbating political instability. There's so much political instability in the Sahel and even wider Africa now presently, which was not there 1-2 decades ago, that we're stabilizing and accepting democratic tenets. But now it has exacerbated political instability everywhere. And finally, it's led to weakening regional alliance, collaborations, corporations, and all of that. It has weakened all of that. Look at ECOWAS. ECOWAS began with 16 countries in 1975. Later, in the millennium or around 2000, Mauritania broke away. Now, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger have also decided to leave and formed the Confederation of Sahelian States. So now remaining how many will still be there? Then there are others, so even the G5 Sahel not working very well again or effectively. So all of these are the effects of these information disorders, information flow, and information dissemination in the Sahel. What should the NATO, or in concluding, what should?
We'll move this to the second.
What NATO and EU should do. Thank you.
Let's move it to talk. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joshua. That was, very comprehensive. Thank you for that. There was a point you raised, which I would like either AISHA and FIDEL or BEVERLY to answer. Okay. It's like a rumor, but I know that I participated in a radio program in Nigeria, which is on issue of China bringing laborers from China, yes, who are serving jail terms to African countries to serve out their terms, using them to execute most of these projects. I want one of you to either confirm it or speak to it, but let's continue. Papa, your turn.
Thank you, Chairman. Don't worry, I will be shorter than Shogun. I'm just a simple technician. I'm not a scholar. Okay. So, and as I promised, I will wear again my full technical hats. And I will try to add 3 more points to my yesterday presentation. And this point are directly tied to technical. Because at the end of the day, you will face whatever policy, whatever strategy we will face the hard reality of technology at the end of the road. So my first point is data privacy. As you may know, I hope I'm not the only technical in the audience. I would like some technicians to be with me at one time. As you may know, the bread and butter of AI is data. AI has the possibility to tackle a vast amount of data to be able to produce whatever you want it can produce. And in Africa, we have a real problem with data privacy. Today, in Africa, there is no regulation. There is attempt on countries in Africa. I know it's in Senegal. There is attempt to regulate the data, the privacy of the people. But right now, let's say the vast amount of countries in Africa, there is no real application of regulation of data. So data on people, data on what they are doing daily basis, on the daily basis, data on all and everything are available to AI machines. And as you may know, the input of the AI come from the data people are generating. So this is one point we should find a way to tackle, meaning whatever its policy, or we should find a way to structure how in Africa we could handle data and the policy on data, and how we could protect privacy on data. If not, this will be the entry point of all AI, whatever AI generation will be based on data they will catch from the people. One of my second point is, so the solution could be how to manage reform, how to handle reform, how to push, how to support reform in Africa, the legislative aspect. Another point is training, capacity building. Yes, AI, as you may, I'm really pushing AI. My last presentation, I was saying about our threat is the best threat, the worst threat is AI and deepfake. But I prefer to stay on AI. AI, the capacity, we lack of capacity building. We lack of training in Africa. All the initiative I'm hearing here is, okay, we have capacity in Western, we have machines in Western, we have technology in Western to fight or to help people, things going on in Africa. This is okay. But remember, one of my colleagues said that, you know that more than 80% of people in Africa don't understand French or English. So they are going through local languages. They are touching people through local language. So if you want to counter misinformation or malinformation, you have to counter it in local language. So even the best way to counter AI is through AI. So you have to counter it through AI, through local language. So at the end of the day, we should find a way to locally empower people, empower technical person to be able to fight against malinformation and disinformation in their local language. So capacity building is also an issue. technical issue. I know the machines and the knowledge is somewhere in the Western, but we should find a way to transfer this capacity, this training, this knowledge in Africa with on African people, so they will be able to develop counter plan in their local language, in their own environment. So coding, the coding, we should be able to code to train people, to train African people in coding for AI in Africa. This is the second point. The third main point, and I love Shogun touched it, infrastructure. Okay, I was in the telecommunication area in 2000, yes, long ago. When I arrived in the telecommunication industry in Africa, we had the main provider was Ericsson,
Yes.
Nokia,
Yes. Back then.
Alcatel.
Those were the days.
You agree with me?
Yeah.
Nowadays, it is Huawei, Huawei,
No.
and Huawei. It's true.
Yes.
It's true. I have friends. I'm not anymore in the telecommunication area, but when I'm talking with CTO, they all specialize in Huawei. All of them specialize in Huawei. So what is the problem? Shogun touched the part of the problem. You say that you will counter. Okay. Through what? Anyhow, you will go through telecommunication system to touch your people. Whatever your message is, you have to go through telecommunication. You have to go through telecommunication platform to touch the people you want to counter influence. Owned by, not owned by Huawei. Okay. Huawei is part of the issue. Second, the pipe is one part of the equation. The other part is data centers, where you will mix all your data. Of your million or billion of data, you have to mix it somewhere.
Where do you store them?
Where you store, when you manage it. Data centers are right now also being implemented by China's government. Chinese governments are helping African governments to build up their data centers.
Yes.
Cloud services.
Yes.
Thank you. The cloud services too are being helped with the government alliance, where you will find, well, I don't know, it may not be Huawei, but another company, Chinese company, they are also building group network of data centers everywhere in Africa. So you have a second problem. Even if you find a way to go through the other networks, where you will store and manage your data will be handled by Chinese. Second problem. Third problem, your tech guys, your technician. Right now in Africa, everywhere, we have a coding class, coding school, coding whatever, handled by Chinese. All the new generation, my son generation, they are now coding with Chinese. They are in Chinese. They are on the Chinese bubble. The new coder, when I'm in Senegal, when I'm talking to the new coder, in one way or another, they are linked to China. China product or China training. So this is one of the, whatever you will decide, at the end of the day, you will face this reality. How will you, through what will you implement this? Anecdotes. I was trying to push the Space Force, my general. Space Force wanted to have a backbone network in Africa, in Central Africa, because of the equator. They need a ground station in Africa. And I tried to push them so hard to say, okay, you have to come to Africa. You have to find a way to install to come back or to come to Africa. You should place your technology in Africa, because beyond Space Force, you could be there in Africa. And also, at this time, I remember there was plenty of African government who wanted someone to work with them in the space sector. A lot of African countries was starting in the space sector, and they need collaboration. And I used to say to the Space Force guys, this is an opportunity for you to at least to counter the presence in China, of China in Africa at the space level. At least find a way to enter Africa and find a way to work with these countries, at least to be partner on the space, because the space is their beginning. They are doing their first step into space. And yes, this is a point for you. You can at least take your hand on it. And guess what? Nothing happened. They didn't move. And who is doing partnership with Africa on the space industry? China again. So, yeah. The point is, it's okay to talk strategy. It's okay to talk policy. It's okay to talk programs. It's okay to point the fingers on the facts. Facts one, facts two. It's real. But at the end of the day, when I'm talking to a CTO, of a telecom company, I say to him, okay, the guys, you want to expand his network, you should find solution. The CEO of a company should find solution to expand his network. And if Chinese come with the package of solutions, the CEO of the company will take the package. And they know they will be somewhere, somehow, they know it. They will somehow control, there is a risk to be controlled somewhere, somehow by Chinese company, because they could put something on the system to be controlled, but there is no other alternative for them. They want to grow their company. They will take the Chinese offer. And you all know the UA case where the China was behind. We don't the UA administration in Ethiopia, where they say that maybe they put Mike in the system. So this was my point.
Thank you so much.
May I?
Okay.
Okay, because I really loved Papa's comments, and I would like to offer some thoughts as well. I'll start with what Joshua said. He mentioned the term digital authoritarianism. So I just want to add to that when we look at the Chinese case of having a domestic model of digital authoritarianism, we all know about the new Silk Road. So there is a digital version of the new Silk Road. So what China is doing is not only offering, a package that involves the digital infrastructure. Okay, I'll come here, I'll give you the routers, I'll give you, the wires, the computers, etc. They also, in terms of this package, is also, I'll give you the know-how about how to have regulations about, obviously, data privacy from a very Chinese point of view. I will train your lawyers, I'll train your media experts to know how to have an information environment that allows you, the government, the authoritarian regime, whatever, to control the information, and not only through the infrastructure, but also through legal framework regulations, and by having trained your elite, your journalists and your media experts. I would like to thank Papa very much for your technician. So you brought a very pragmatic perspective on what we have and what we can or not do. And I would like to add two things and actually have a technical question. You said data privacy, and remind me what IGNACIO said earlier about EU. We have EU that is a champion in terms of GDPR, in terms of Artificial Intelligence Act. I hope that there could be this transfer of knowledge in the near future to the Sahel region and in Africa in general. And I have a technical question. It might be a stupid question because I haven't got obviously a background on artificial intelligence. In terms of large language models, is there enough data on the local language to train the systems or not? Because I understand that you need the data in order to train your artificial intelligence, the language models. Is there enough content? I mean, I'm sure there is enough in French data content, but is there enough in local languages to utilize these models or not?
Not yet.
Not yet.
But AI is so powerful that it could somehow change itself. So not yet for the moment, but in, let's say, less than few years, they will be able to.
We have to be patient.
For instance, few days ago, we have in Senegal, there was the new prime minister doing his speech on his vision, new vision on Senegal. But the translation, the automatic translation in Wolof or local language was done full time, automatically by AI.
Okay.
And I hear the translation in Wolof. It was not so bad.
Okay.
It was not so bad. It was not so bad at all.
But it's going to get better as long as you train it with more,
Yes.
with more data content. Okay. Can I go on? Or do you...
Yeah, go on. So
Okay,
that I move to.
I will follow Papa's pattern and try to be, pragmatic and provide a framework. Whenever I think of an information or dismiss whatever information flow, I think of a certain methodology, a pattern that I think will help us. And it's called, for those that know the literature, being ABCD: A, referring to actors; B, behavior; C, content; and D, dissemination. So looking at the, let's say, Sahel environment, many of colleagues mentioned many things yesterday about the proliferation of actors. So you have many actors, you have governments that have get rid of friends, let's say, media outlets that they not favor. You have foreign, we have to identify, the foreign and domestic influence actors. We have to look at, as Joshua said earlier, if everybody has a transistor radio. So this is an environment where you have, a lot of proliferated actors. The second is behavior. And what I'm saying here is can also be used in the final panel discussion about, how we can tackle and fight all this. In the behavior, you have to look at the narratives, whether are narratives that polarize society, whether are narratives that aim to, to spread some distrust about certain institutions. There we have to look at who and how the narrative is shaped in terms of perception management, in terms of social engineering. As I said, C stands for the content. So content in local language is obviously an important factor. I'm thinking, and I don't have, a good answer on that, whether and how we can tackle the information plethora. Information plethora usually leads to lack of attention. So maybe there is too much information, again, misinformation, disinformation. The human brain cannot cope and, digest all this information. So we have to find a balance when we want, to construct a counter narrative, not to maybe overload, let's say, the system, but how to target, certain populations with certain narratives. So it's always the tailored, perspective. It affects with artificial intelligence, the amount, the extent to which you can automate the content. You have a troll factor, you have artificial intelligence, you can do things that you need 100 people, you just can do it in 5 minutes. And last but not least, the ambassador showed us an interesting video earlier in the morning. It's the dissemination. How do you disseminate? Is text? Is it audio? Is it video? Is it deep fakes? And here again, you need, the socio-political whatever approach. You need the social demographics to know, at what people you should target. You should target them by a radio message. Should I target those people by SMS? Should I target those through a platform? How do you reach a certain audience, whether it's in Burkina Faso, in Mali, or Niger? So this is, I think, a framework that will help us, put certain things in context in terms of understanding the information or disinformation flow, and in terms of tackling the problem. Can I tackle the actors? just get them or throw them away, arrest them or whatever? Can I tackle the behavior, the narratives? Can I, I don't have the answer, so just raise the questions. Can I tackle in terms of minimizing or affecting the amount of content? Can I attack the system in terms of how they disseminate the message? So open questions, obviously. Thank you. I'll give the floor to.
All right, thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Okay, I want to go back to the narrative, but from the NATO standpoint, because actually I think that's what it's interesting for us. I'm very happy to listen the chairman before saying, and also some of our African colleagues saying that Africans are ready to work with NATO, and that's a good news because many in NATO countries thinks that they don't want to do any business with NATO. So that means that NATO has something to say to the Africans. Not everything is lost. And actually, when we look the deep picture, we have some good news. At the end of the day, we know that in Africa, we have a lot of soft power to provide to the Africans. And there is some facts that prove this statement. For instance, when we see the flows of migrants in Africa, they are not going to Russia or to China. They are going to Europe or to the Western countries because they realize that they want to live like we live here. So that's a very powerful message. It's a message that we have to convey to the Africans, back to the Africans. If you are with us, we will help you to develop your economies and to, at the end of after some times, to develop and to try to approach your way of living to the one we have here. Because actually, that is what they want. They want to live better, in the better conditions, and nobody wants to live in a very deteriorating environment. The second point is we have to provide a good message regarding how to tackle the Russians, because actually the Russians are committing a lot of mistakes, and we have to capitalize on the mistakes committed by the Russians. The Russians came into Africa saying, okay, unlike these Westerners, we will provide security for the Sahel. We know how to provide security. We are not tied by this natural interest or neocolonialism or whatever, or however you want to call it. But actually, they are doing the other way around. As Fidel has mentioned before, and I'm happy to listen to him, the situation in the Sahel is deteriorating dramatically in the last months, in the last year, and that's in part because of the Russians. So this is a very powerful message, and we have to send this message back to the African audiences. And we have to convey this message, okay, the Russians are not providing any security to you, actually are doing the other way around. They are aggravating the problem in Africa. And finally, we need also a good message regarding NATO behavior in other theaters. I mean, as we know, everybody wants to be with the winners. Nobody wants to go with the losers. Now NATO is in other theaters. One is Ukraine. The outcome of Ukraine war will have an impact on the Sahel, absolutely. The same as the war in the Middle East. If at the end of the day, Russia succeed in Ukraine, okay, the African leaders will say, okay, maybe it's better to go with the Russians, because at the end of the day, when we go with NATO or NATO partners, they are always losing. So we need to provide this narrative that we are an exit, a successful alliance. And finally, is regarding the message, the different messages that we are conveying, not only NATO and the European Union, that sometimes is contradictory, but also among the NATO nations themselves. For me, it was very, very funny to listen the ambassador of the European Union Assembly talking about this Italian plan, the Mattei plan, which is probably very good for Italy. But actually, this plan is competing with the Spanish plan. We had also our plan. And the plan is, for us, our plan is to send the migration flow to the east, and for the Italian is to send the migration flows to the west. So it's not an integrated policy. Why do not get agreements? This is just bilateral, but we can move this agreement to the European or even NATO levels. What I'm trying to say, and I finish here, is that we have to integrate all the policies and strategies provided by the nations themselves and by the international organization, NATO and the European Union. Otherwise, we are sending, let's say, wrong messages to the African audiences.
Thank you so much, Ignatius. Something has just happened now. With your presentation, we've started the third panel.
Okay.
Because you were already providing the
Background.
way forward and what we wanted to know, what should we be doing? So because we knew that after 2 days, we will start converging. And I think our ideas have started converging.
Yes.
So what we're going to do now, we're going to go to the audience now, give them, see whether we can get contributions. I don't want to point people, but if I don't get, I'm going to do that. I want people to just give us some recommendation. 1, 2, 3, 4, straight to the point contributions. Then we'll come back to the audience. Okay. I'll give you guys like 30 seconds each. But let's go to the audience first, and then we need to summarize within the next 30 minutes. All right? Please, the take-home assignment that we were given yesterday. Recommendation, please. Come on, guys. We wanted this to be very interactive. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Jakub. First of all, we would like to be very grateful for our host to invitation for us for being here. And as a young generation that surely we are, we would like to spread our thoughts about the impact that the influencer and bloggers had on that topic. We can also see the impact that the Russian war in Ukraine had in Poland, that of course we came from. We can see nowadays we can see the influencers and the bloggers had huge impact. If we consider the TV news or the radio broadcast, we can see the influencers and the bloggers has like the newest information. Taking consider the situation like two years ago that a rocket fly above our borders from the Ukraine and hit our grants. So like the normal TV programs that they show us the information, we waited for the facts for about 1 day to confirm what's happened there. But the influencer and the bloggers gave the audience the answer within 1 hour. So I think when you are targeting the youths and you have told us that the main audience in the Sahel, it's about 19 or 20 years old youths. So I think the NATO should like invest in that part of the gathering information and getting into the audience. So I was looking for the research about how many people in the Sahel have the mobile phones, and we find out that right now it's about 30%. Maybe someone can confirm it for us. But if it's right now 30%, we have like look forward what it will be within 5 years. Because it's a huge opportunity to invest right now in the influencers and the blogger, because within 5 years it could be too late. The other side can do pretty much the same as the NATO. Russian right now is investing in the influence, and we have seen the video of the rapper, and you have to believe us, for the young generation, it has huge impact. You know, for maybe older generation, it's just a funny video that someone just singing. Everyone has laughing about it, but you have imagined this man who was rapping can have 10 million views on YouTube, and it's huge impact. Imagine just getting maybe 10 of these rappers and you have got 1 million audience. So this is my thoughts about that, and thank you for sharing with that.
Thank you, Jakub. That was a very nice one. That's another, yeah? You're back? Yes, thank you.
Good morning. I'm Tomás Quecedo. I'm coming from Spain, from a NATO headquarters. And first of all, thank you, because these open study days are very enlightening, me at least, and I'm having a better view about what is happening. And when we are talking about the dissemination of the information, this strategic communication that is now what we are talking, how to win the battle of the narrative. And first of all, is we need to recognize in the Western that we are losing the battle of the narrative. And we are losing the battle of the narrative because the first that we need to get or to recover is the credibility. And I think that is something that we don't want to assume, that we don't have the credibility. We are used to continue doing the same way that we were handling the business in the past. And one example, for instance, is I saw one article in an African journalist about Samsung and Huawei, who were just trying to sell phones to the government of Senegal. The representative of the Samsung went to a 5-star luxury hotel, and the representative of Huawei was to another hotel. This is the way that the people are seeing how we are running business. And it's something that we need to change our mindset, how we want to make the business, because at the end is to make business. But this is something that we need to recover. If we want to change something, is we need to, European Union and the Western country need to recover the credibility that we had in the past, and at this moment we don't have.
Thank you so much. Can I ask, I would like to have a contribution from a lady.
She's raising her hand.
Thank you. That's so much. Fantastic.
Hello, thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is also Jacob from the Polish Air Force Universities. I would like to highlight and speak a few words of issue not directly and strictly related to the topic, but very, very important on our modern world. Especially important and prominent example of this is presidential election in United States, for example. The right now election and the whole campaign is for sure maintained and made in social media. This is, to be honest, not the election and the campaign made this also made by the meetings in real life and speeches, but it's basically the social media war. The Instagram reels, the Twitter posts, like the Trump going viral with theatrical poses, almost killed. This is all social media fuel that is so powerful, that is changing the shifts in political views and changing the basically possible world plans and doctrines. Also in, for example, the NATO doctrines. And this is topic parallel to the polarization and the profilization of the users, because the consumption and the consumer of the social media is the user and basically the potential profit. Everything that is created to make a profit. Even if that is free, like social media, it is focused to make a profit. And the profit is information, and sell information to a marketer that will polarize and aim to construct an information bubble over this consumer and this user. In my opinion, this is very important to try to create something like potential profilization of the African user, of the African society, to try to analyze deeply, in depth, try to really understand their mindset. We are Europeans, we are from Poland. We have our history, our mindset. French people are completely different. Russian people, this is absolutely the different world. I have read really many books. They are completely like a different species. They are thinking like otherwise. And this could be absolutely correct and similar with the African society. I'm not speaking that is bad. We are just different. And history shown, for example, the profilization of Polish politicians by United Kingdom. They had pinpointed the table and the scheme of work. If this will happen, do this. If they will react so, do this. And this was made by in-depth and precise analysis. And I think that could be very helpful to really understand and to control the problem.
Thank you so much. And I think you brought a dimension that is very important to us. For instance, internet penetration in Nigeria is about 80%, and you're talking about a population of more than 200 million, and of which about 60 to 70% of them are below 35 years. And that was why I wanted to get conversation from, I'm 50 plus, I'm sure my friend that just spoke is under 30. We wanted to get dimension from a lot of people, young people who are here, women who are here, men who are here. Let's know, because for instance, if you take up this and you're clicking, when I'm clicking, I'm looking at my data, am I finishing it? Probably because I'm thinking about other things. But young people, especially when they are not the ones paying the money, their parents are paying, they are clicking, they are clicking, they are clicking. They are making money for somebody, they are not thinking that direction. This is exactly what he has brought in. That you might think the internet is free. It's not taking anything from you, but somebody has 4 million followers. You're making money for the person. And these are perspectives that people need to start knowing. And these are some of the narratives that are very important. Do we have, okay, good.
Good morning, good afternoon. I'm not sure what time it is. Bonnie Golbeck, I'm from the NATO-STRATCOM COE. It's more of a reflection when we talk about this being a whole of society problem and then hopefully a whole of society solution. And Paco, thank you for sending the link that you just sent for the disinformation and women versus disinformation. So the question I have, I guess, for the room is, how do we engage the women in the Sahel? How do we make things become available to them? Minor reading indicates that they have a disproportional workload at the home, etc. So how do we make things accessible for that part of the community so that they can help bring up the new generation, being aware with media literacy, literacy in general, STEM, getting women involved in the academic community, fighting disinfo, being in AI, etc. How do we engage that part of the community?
Thank you so much. And I will take this as our last question, unless there's any other contribution. So if we don't have, Aisha, I will start with you, and I would like you to answer her, not because you're a woman, because I could as well answer those questions, but I know you're practically on the ground. You do a lot of work with women in the communities. I know you're going to provide a very good perspective for us.
The question regarding the.
Sorry, you're as well concluding now. So as you're answering that, you're concluding all your points. So I may not come back to you again.
Okay, for this panel.
Thank you.
Okay. For this panel or the next?
There's no next.
For the entire, unless next year.
Okay, so I'll okay. Talking about the women. There's this project. I'll go back to community radio because for me it's one of the most powerful tools actually that's out there. There's this community radio led by women in Senegal. And it's these women have been able actually to raise awareness in their community so that the men can let them, allow, in good, be able to stand for elections at community level, to be elected mayor, to be elected a councillor, to be head of a teacher parents association, have run businesses, and they did that by raising awareness through the radio. And they have what it's called femme reporter, women reporters. It makes more sense in French than in English. These are housewives actually, who have been trained to go out there, go to their community, get the information, and be able to, repackage it, do the editing, and put it on the radio. And then there's a call-in show. These women at the same time, if there is any misinformation going around in the community, that's the way they go about it, addressing it. And they've been able to break so many barriers because this is a community that's strongly religious, but they've been able to, have results. And this is an example that can be replicated. So going back to possible solutions, I mentioned yesterday the media literacy and digital literacy. I also mentioned about local, national or continental fact checkers networks. There's an existing one, an African fact checkers network that do a lot of amazing work. And also at the academic side, for instance, CESTI, with the journalism school for Senegal, but also most of French-speaking Africa, are looking into ways of making fact-checking a standalone course and specialty in the school. So hopefully that will be done. And I also mentioned yesterday about the resilience of independent media and the need to support independent media. I'll bring in two new things actually that further target the youth bulk. The first one is using different kind of tools. You have it can be a mobile app, it can be a parlor game, on disinformation with scenarios. You have quiz, you have challenges. This will help actually those playing it internalize the how to be able to decipher between factual information and not factual information. And also there's a possibility of building a WhatsApp audio bot that can be in any language, African language, where people can also go through the process of, learning or being more aware about the differences. And there's this great aspect, cultural storytelling. Africans are known to be orators. Our history mostly is passed on orally from generation to generation. And storytellings that we have in our different cultures actually are tools that we can use to be able to adapt it, because there's always these idioms, these principles, these values that could be included in those messaging, and they can stack. And in Burkina Faso, they even had a festival for puppets, a puppet festival, an international one, but I don't know if it's still on. But puppet shows that go from village to village, these are also tools that can be used to be able to do that. So I'll come to three. After talking about the 5 points, there are three important things for me. It's community ownership. Community ownership is very important, whichever solution is developed. And earlier, Beverly mentioned, to be able to re-engage and acknowledge past errors. I think that's also very important. And lastly, but not the least, it's also understanding the local culture and the deeply rooted societal dynamics. It was mentioned earlier by Jacob, if I'm not mistaken. And that is very, very, because each society, each culture, they have their specificities, and the way you approach them, actually, the best way is to go through culture, anthropology, to be able to do that. And you have African academics actually, who usually, unfortunately, their work stay in the academics. It's difficult to bring them down to society. But more and more as a civil society organization, we've been tapping into the academics and see how we can bring them into the governance and democratic issues. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Can I give you a minute to react? Yeah. I thought you wanted to say something.
Yes, Alex, JFC Branson. I just wanted to share some reflection and maybe some recommendations. As I came from JFC Branson, we look after the Northern Europe, and I was curious to learn how Russian disinformation and TTPs are different in Africa, and it seems that they are following the same logic. So if we zoom out, we can see that effectively Chinese unrestricted warfare and Russian new generation warfare, they're very similar in the 90% information warfare effectively, right? So it's about subversion of the West. So we can see that this kind of new axis of evil, North Korea, Russia, Iran, sponsored by China, is fighting a proxy war in Africa in a very similar way as it does in Ukraine, for instance. So this is one of the important insights for me. But talking about recommendations, if they're fighting a war, a proxy war, which is 90% information warfare, then NATO is clearly has a role in Sahel region, right? So can NATO take on Russian disinformation and information operations? Of course we can. If we apply IEA methodology, we can look at the conflict dynamics. We can identify drivers of this conflict in each particular country. We can look at the behaviors and attitudes that manifest this conflict. We can look at the audiences, do human factors analysis, cultural study, historical context, come up with media consumption analysis, behavior analysis, and propose certain COAs for implementation. But the biggest problem here is that we need to have a clear whole government strategy in Africa. And our discussion shows that this is actually lacking on behalf of NATO and the West in general. Russia and China has certain strategy in Africa, as it has in Ukraine, while NATO is struggling with that. And the economy is another challenge, right? If the West is not compatible, is not competitive with Chinese model in Africa, then fighting disinformation would be futile because we will lack the clout to do that. So economy, strategy, and yes, NATO can play a role.
Thank you so much.
Break at 1:15 instead of 1. So we have.
Oh, sure. Okay, that's good. So we're going to start with Fidel. So let me.
Okay.
3 minutes for each person.
Yes, sir. I'm not going to spend 3 minutes.
I'm including myself because I want to give you people up to 3 minutes. So three
Yes,
minutes, and that will take us to 15 minutes.
Yes, sir. All right. Thank you. The fight must be localized. That is what I put everything together to say that, in fact, if Europeans or Americans tell Africans that democracy is good, Africans are definitely not going to take it hook, line, sinker. They are going to question why the West is saying it. But if I tell my fellow Africans that democracy is good, then we can start the conversations from there. So there's a need for partnership in order to let Africans own the communication. So then you back Africans to do the work. I think it works because, the disinformation has been so much entrenched that sometimes even when Africans are being told the good things, they become suspicious of whoever that is giving the information out. So not long ago, we had some communication or some conference, and then someone mentioned that, well, the colonizer is coming to advise me. So whatever he's saying, the fact that the person was a colonizer means I should not listen to anything the person says. But that is always, we know that it's besides the point. Because if we take NATO membership, how many NATO countries colonize Africa? So you don't put everything together and then, put the whole thing in the one basket and rubbish it. So these are some of the things. So what I'm trying to say is that the local partnership, the use of local partners in trying to counter disinformation is very critical. For instance, the issue about the Sahel, Operation Sahel stopped the terrorists within their tracks. Then we had Operation Barkhane. Now, Barkhane was supposed to have long-term goals of stabilizing the Sahel by factoring in nationalist issues of ethnic tensions and all that. And that was what initiated the Algiers talk, which has currently collapsed because the junta in Mali does not want to sit down with the Tuareg. So you put all this together, you need a local communicator to put it across, because immediately the communicator or the person giving out the information is from Europe or the West. From the word go, people do not want to listen. However, when the persons of Africa, like my dear professor seated there and our former general, then they have that kind of confidence building, starting right from there, that my fellow African is saying that. So they will ask the questions, and because you are on the side of the truth and you are not hiding anything, it flows. They said when you are speaking the truth, you don't have to remember anything. And that is what some of us do in our own small ways, to put out the facts and tell our fellow Africans. By so doing, I've been able to convince many young men and women about some of these things, that, look, this is wrong narrative, that is not a fact, and we've had them on board. In some other cases, I have also lost some friends, because then, apart from being called Fidel, they feel that I should buy into this kind of false narratives and other things that do not really are not really based on fact, but falsehood. So these are some of the things, and the more we keep doing this, the better.
Thank you, thank you, Fidel. I need to cut you off now. Thank you so much. I'll start with you.
Me?
Yeah, 3 minutes.
Okay.
My hands are here already. So.
Yes. Okay. In terms of offering, I don't know, like a smart thought or something to tackle, I'm sure that we all will come across many things like sponsor fact-checking mechanisms, support citizen journalism, partnering with NGOs, raise public awareness, etc. So I don't want to go there. I think many will cover that or already have covered that. So I had, last night I was thinking about this, think out of the box. And I thought, I know it might sound fun in the beginning. I thought of Hollywood. Hollywood movies. Make a movie with African actors that play in Hollywood films, and
Nollywood as well, the Nigerian one.
Indeed, that's what one of the person I had in mind. Make movies that portray what happens in Sahel. I think it's one way, I think, thinking out of the box, that you can get some sort of influence to all the audience, the Western audience and the audience in Sahel. And it could be movies, it could be documentaries, it could be, media projects that will be sponsored by large organizations like BBC, Deutsche Welle, whatever, and that. And I will apologize because my final thought is not something that will help in terms of identifying possible solutions. It's a scary scenario that I want to share with you and hope it ever happens. I've looked into the Chinese and the Russian internet model, put it this way. If we go back to March 2022, we have, maybe some of you will be aware of the concept of RUNET. Very briefly, Russia has isolated itself from, let's say, the global internet. I'm trying to be a bit simplistic right now. So think of this as an asymmetric option. Unfortunately, whatever we said and we might imply tomorrow morning might not work, because we might never actually reach the target audience. If somebody advises any country in the world, I'm referring to Sahel, that, do you want to have, a safe information environment? Are you afraid that somebody might penetrate, influence, etc.? So there is an option. Me, Russia, and China, we have the infrastructure, we have the know-how, we have done it. North Korea as well, Iran partly, and we can help you so that you can get isolated from the global internet and you can have a national information sphere where everything will be safe. I will just finish with that and give some indications. It's not going to happen from day one, day two, but how did it happen in the other countries? First, you say that, there are some NGOs, some whatever, I don't like this country, so, just leave, likely. Then you say, oh, this is a French, German, whatever, Spanish media, TV, I don't like them, so they should leave our country as well. Then you referred, in terms of regulation, that having a clean internet, an internet where the content is safe for the regime, And in the end, you switch off, that to be very over-simplistic, you switch off and you cut off and you have internet fragmentation, you have your national information sphere where it's very hard for us to penetrate, to do anything. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. You know, professors, it's always difficult to calm them down, especially when they get into the mood. All right. I like your idea of making movies. We were talking about Afrobeats, you know, getting some of these African artists to, you know, to tour most of these countries, you know, probably tour with some of the European artists that these kids are watching on their, and they want to know them. That might be a way. For one thing I know, I'm sure some of you know that the last 10 years of Afrobeats growing up in Nigeria, our image has started being laundered and started coming back right. Initially, when I go to a place, I say, I'm Nigerian. The person is like, probably Yahoo. You know? Maybe it's a scammer. But these days, when I say, oh, I'm Nigerian, the person goes, oh, Burna Boy, Wizkid, Davido, you know? So it's painting, I might be a way to start repainting the image of the West in most of these countries. Your thought?
I have 3 minutes. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have already said what I wanted to say before, but just to summarize some ideas. Having NATO in my mind, what NATO should do in Africa. I explained before that we need NATO needs a comprehensive strategy to tackle African issues, especially misinformation by Russia. Russia is, for me, is bigger problem than China, because Russia is challenging us in a very proactive way, not only in Africa, but all over the world. And we have to, first of all, acknowledge that we are in a sort of hybrid war with the Russians in Africa, and we want to win this war. We need to win this war, because if we lose Africa, we will pay for it heavily in NATO. So we have to integrate NATO, Africa, into the NATO strategic equation. And we have to do it at every levels. It's not only to provide some policy, as I guess this NATO Naples hub is doing. It's also to transform this policy into facts. For me, right now, the most important thing for NATO is to prevent Russia expansion in Africa. We know that it's very difficult to change the narrative in the center of Sahel, but we have not lost yet in the West African countries. So NATO should concentrate in these countries right now, because we are having the risk of losing them. Of course, there are many measures, and they have been put on the table here. For me, also, the most important thing is to focus on the journalists, because they are the ones that are transmitting narratives into their populations. Of course, native journalists, we should do seminars like this one more often, and to bring in more African journalists and media makers to provide a different narrative than the one that they are getting in their countries. We have to capitalize on the Russian and Chinese mistakes, because they are not that much successful. We have to tell to them and to prove that they are wrong. And finally, we have also to use some NATO capabilities. For instance, the Center of Excellence. This hub also is a good weapon, not a weapon, a tool to have a relationship with Africa. We should even improve the capabilities of these centers, and having in mind that, as mentioned before, we need to win this war in this hybrid war in the Sahel. I'm sorry.
Thank you so much. It was just 3 minutes, so that's fine.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Papa, your turn?
Yeah, don't worry. I will be shorter. I'm a technician, remember.
Practitioner.
Yes, technicians. I will take part of my 3 minutes to I will take part of my 3 minutes to throw another stone. I forgot it. Is once again China. I want you to realize that quite all our e-governance systems, all African e-governance systems had been installed by China. Do you imagine, in terms of security strategy, whatever, our e-governance systems have been implemented by China, in addition to telecommunication, whatever. Okay, so this was the last stone. So recommendation, what I could say is, I like the idea of peer-to-peer business. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm an entrepreneur, right? So I'm a businessman. So I'm coming back to the business, simple business, door to door. This was you or Shogun who said that Chinese is at the other door. You cross the street and Chinese are here. So we should come back to this model where, at least at the on the technology industry, I know it's beyond, maybe it's beyond the scope of NATO, but NATO should find a way to bring back providers, UN, US or EU providers, technical providers, through whatever PPP or sponsor, but our telecommunication or our IT telecommunication industry should not be let into the hand of the Chinese only. So with NATO, I know it's, but at the end of the day, it's about security. If you put the security side on it, you could find a system or a mechanism to bring back, because once again, when I say it's not the CEO, the head of the telecom company, who just want to grow his subscribers. He's not pro-China or pro whatever. It's pro-business. So if to balance the offer, the Chinese offer, we have other offers, they will look at it. So if you are not at the table, if you want to be back on the game, you have to be on the table. With one, I'm talking technically, at least at the technical level, telecommunication level, you should find a way to be back on the table.
Thank you so much. I go to Shogun. I'll come back to you. Shogun,
okay.
Maybe one. Are you 1 minute or two?
3.
Okay.
Negotiation. Yes. Thank you. This is very good. In tackling these issues or problems, especially about Sahel and what the EU or NATO or the West should do seriously. Everybody has talked about the media. Yes, that's where we need to come to, the media. But I have it from another perspective, using those local languages, following the cultural values to reach the locals, also doing it the best way or the way the Chinese and the Russians have done it. We need to counter them. But the NATO needs to control the content. The content is a very, very important thing. For example, there is this ongoing discussion now on, or I will call it awareness raising now in Africa. And some of it have been passed through the social media and some other direct media, traditional media, other platforms where people can reach the information. But that information has been more to the enlightened community or population in Africa and particularly in the Sahel. There's this thing going on that China, by giving free loans, the ambassador said it in the morning, that China will come and say, no condition, take loan, little condition, or the low interest, take loan, do this, we want to do this, we want to engage in this. Over time, this has accumulated as huge debt on African countries, and now creating what we call the debt trap for African countries, and now pushing some African countries into very huge debt problem or burden. That has also been going on the past few months on Nigeria's huge debt burden, some African countries' huge debt burden owed to China. So some African countries are coming to consciousness that even all of these loans, whether with interest or no interest, or whether with conditions or conditionalities or no conditionalities, they are coming back as huge debt trap on African governments. So in other words, we need to have a rethink of this debt, of these loans we take from China. So now, in controlling the content of the media or information flow, NATO needs to work from that perspective in controlling this disinformation, malinformation, and all of that. There is also, in the past decade, China and Russia has increased scholarship. Indu mentioned it, I'm sorry, Indu mentioned something yesterday earlier in the background that some of our colleagues studied in China. Even till now, at the both master's and PhD levels, China and Russia, all of a sudden Russia are returning to giving scholarship to Africans, is to rewrite their story, is to engage the enlightened community. All of this which Europe have been doing from the 60s for Africa. So the West, NATO countries needs to come back. That's another platform to rewrite the story, to re-engage Africa. Again, Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger particularly, they have said that there is high insecurity and that's why they are engaging Russia. But since they have started engaging Russia, Russia is selling a lot of weapons to them. There is even more insecurity for them now. The number of deaths in Burkina Faso alone in 2023 until now in Burkina Faso is higher than anywhere in the world currently. So there is so we can also follow our information from that place in countering Russia's disinformation from that perspective.
Thank you.
And
Thank
finally,
you. Let me cut you off.
Please, 1 second. Re-engaging African leadership. NATO needs to re-engage African leadership and reduce conditions and conditionalities of giving anything to Africa. All of these will be able to help NATO very well. And now finally, NATO needs to harmonize its policies and engagements in Africa. We should come as a whole, come one, come all, not as individual countries. That also has caused problem. Particularly look at what Spain is doing, look at what France is also doing. So when the policies are harmonized, actions are harmonized, then we achieve together and the information will flow effectively.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Mario.
Well, thank you. This is, we're under pressure, right? Africa is Europe's future, and we cannot afford to do nothing, even in the absence of a strategy that I wholeheartedly support. So as the highest defense civilian at NATO, I can tell you strategies takes months and years to develop, but we need to deliver results. Literal West Africa is the imminent threat. And by the time NATO heads of state and government meet next year, they will expect something that NATO has done. And here we have a role to play. NATO should proactively engage with other organizations, particularly in the EU, just to protect the militaries from doing what the civilians are not doing, but it will fall our way when the thing hits the fan. I do appreciate all hubs' lines of effort, and there are multiple. If you bring information together in the house, it would be great. And I'll be glad to support you in that. And you have a lot to offer to the Alliance. The COE in Riga has a community of interest that's largely complementary to yours. We meet next in June. Let's think about a session and initiative together. What does NATO do? 7 things in highlights. NATO listens and understands. We understand we don't need to act on everything we know, but there are precious little spaces in NATO where you can reflect without automatically triggering the thoughts of action, including military action. This is why these spaces are so valuable. There are so many initiatives and things going on. There's a little awareness. We need a clearinghouse for all these things. We need to know better who is doing what and perhaps delineate how we can best support each other. Second, NATO builds defense capability. NATO has set the golden standard for defense reform, working together in interoperability. and it has the capacity to provide African and other nations with functional, credible, high-class forces under civilian democratic control. It's a value proposition. We should be coming forward with that. Third, NATO militaries help with humanitarian aspects in civilian missions. Think a chemical leak and a military lab that can help there. Fourth, we better integrate information operations into our missions. Stratcom is a new discipline. We need to get better at filling capability targets, but also putting best people in these positions in our missions. It's a no-brainer, but nations do not come up forward with filling these posts at NATO at all times. 5, NATO needs to increase the risk appetite. We are unwilling to risk. We need to, this is a wide area where you need to experiment. And when we fail, be ready to fail, but fail forward. Learn from that and go on. 6th, we balance interests and values. First of all, while arguing our cases to you and the multi-aligned communities, we need to propose it in terms of interest. What is the threat to your territorial integrity? What is the, if you don't punish the Kremlin and go after that, what will happen to your space society, etc.? Be clear about that. And second, that's an unpopular proposition. When we speak to these more traditional societies, we must tailor our expression of progressive liberal values. I'm a great fan. Never renounce on the individual when when harm is done, but it's not about compromising our values, but realizing that to make progress, you sometimes have to compromise interests rather than values, and take into account the other countries' interests and values in order to forge a relationship. 7th, last, NATO knows what it needs, and we're not there. What's in it for NATO? We need to figure it out first for ourselves, and then in discussion with partners. Could it be that we're getting additional forces for NATO or EU-led operations? Could it be that we might be able to test doctrines in real-life operations? Could it be closer to Stratcom that we use your expertise to develop our information environment assessments? Could it be that we can use your language, small language capability to test our tools? Could it be that we need, if we are looking for local voices, that we can reach to you and your networks? Could it also be that when we test, develop themes and messages, we come to you and you help us? I think arguably there are many things in it for the alliance that we can work together. And the last topic is, and thank you for bearing with me, that even beyond going for a NATO strategy, I would argue that the EU and NATO should leverage their strengths. You know, beyond who's in the role, that we'll discuss this, that will be discussed later on what. You know, the EU has a set of tools, NATO has a set of tools. Ideally, this will be a joint strategy for potentially the Sahel, but for Africa. And then we can sort of divide the labor according who's better at what. Thank you so much for having us. Amen.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for bearing with me.
I knew when you considered that 3 minutes to me, you're going to come back to take it.
With 5.
It's all right. Thank you. Thank you so much. And practically or technically, we've come to the end of the sections for today. We're going to go out, have good lunch, come back for the summary and a farewell message from the director. Thank you, everyone.